welcome back to Bo's Garage, guys. Tonight we're talking GM engines. And no, we're not talking about the wonderful LSY that's under the hood of that thing. Or the, I guess they finally sorted it out, LLY, that is in the enclave here. We're talking about, hands down, in my opinion, the best engine General Motors offers, the best light duty engine for trucks, and that is the now current iteration LZO. The previous was L3B. I think there's one more in there, but the 3-liter straight six diesel, a brilliant little engine. Now, they did have issues in the first model year. Every truck does. And they also suffer from the same problem every single diesel engine on the market does, and that is DEF issues. But unfortunately, if you live in a place like California or whatever that has emissions, well, you're kind of screwed, and I'm sorry for you. Here in Mississippi, if you can find a shop to do it, to delete and remove all that garbage off of there, you can have a fantastic engine, because we don't do emissions here, because who cares? But I digress. The LZO, or 3-liter Duramax, it is a godsend of an engine. It is GM's 21st century Hail Mary. GM in the early 2000s, the LS was king. It was king. With the LS engines, starting in 2007, well, LS based, because obviously there's many different iterations in that family of engine. They brought in active fuel management in 2007, thus starting an issue. And then in 2019, GM made the brilliant decision to go from 8 active and 8 non-active lifters to all 16 lifters being active. Well, obviously that's turned the LS, now LT, family of engines to a glorified boat anchor. So unless you go yank all that shit out of there, or DOD delete it, put a tuner on it, something to shut that off, you're going to have trouble. But anyway, we're not talking about that one. We're talking about the 3-liter straight six. Now, when it first came out, I was a little on the fence. In my opinion, the only light-duty diesel that ever gets any love from me is the OM616 and OM615 Mercedes diesels. Call me a snob, but I think that is a god of a diesel engine. So, I was a little skeptical, and on top of that, I was a little bit hurt because I've always been very partial to the 4.3-liter V6. I'm a firm believer that is an absolute tank of an engine. I had one in a Silverado, loved it. Didn't have a lot of power, but it was a torque monster, and it was just a great little motor. But the 4.3 went the way of the West, and the LZO, well, L3B, I think was the designation of that era of engine, came in, and bye-bye 4.3. And the problem with them, though, was their Achilles heel. A rubber drive belt at the rear of the engine for the oil pump. Now, at the time when they debuted, the service interval was 100,000 miles. So, if you have a 4-wheel drive truck, per se, if I remember correctly, I'm not looking at it, so I'm not I'm not looking at it currently, so I'm not giving the accurate book time, but if I remember, I think it was 14 hours of labor. Because obviously you have to remove the transmission transfer case to get to the back of the engine. Now, it could be a little bit overstated in that time. I would have to go back and look at the book. But I digress. So, at 100,000 miles, basically, you just had to cough up a couple grand for the service. So you think 14 hours of labor, and our labor rate around 2019, 2020 was $166 an hour. So you do the math there. Now, the service interval was pushed to, I think, 180, 200,000 miles. But still, to me, that is something that would be in the back of my mind the entire time having this engine. And this engine is not just exclusive to the Sierra Silverado twins, it is also available in the Chevrolet Tahoe, Chevrolet Suburban, GMC Yukon and Yukon XL, and the Cadillac Escalade. And it is fantastic in those applications. Hell, the shop foreman at the dealership I worked at before, his wife had one, and if I remember correctly, he said they went like 700 miles on a tank of fuel, which is wild, because this thing gets fantastic mileage, and I can get about 450 out of a tank. So 700 miles in a huge SUV is phenomenal. So the enterprise of it, and it is a great seller. Usually when we get them on the lot, they're gone. It is one of the hot sellers, and on top of that, I know why GM done it. Because GM has to answer to the federal government like every other auto manufacturer out there. And the federal government has this stupid thing called CAFE standards. It's corporate average fuel economy, if I remember correctly. But basically they say, hey, by X year, every one of your cars across the board, it basically has to be an average of 28 miles to the gallon. Well, you see, GM sells light-duty trucks. And what do trucks have? Big V8s that drink gas. So this little fuel-sipping, I think 27 is the MPG rating or something like that. I could be wrong. I have to look it up, but very high mileage. I've heard people report 20 plus, nearly 30, and a little over 30 in certain vehicles. But you get the point. Over 20 some odd miles to the gallon in a full-size truck. That is phenomenal. So, obviously, if you have that there, plus your other small SUVs, this one was rated 31 miles to the gallon highway. Granted, this is a Buick, but it's under GM's corporate umbrella. Obviously, that's going to raise the numbers, so even though you have a couple of fire-breathing V8s, these numbers right here, make it so you can sell these. So it's understandable from General Motors' perspective why they put this out there. But at the end of the day, now the new one, I know the older iteration, I think it was L3B, or no, the L3B, the previous iteration of the engine, it was 465 foot-pounds torque, which was the same as the 6.2 liter V8. I think the new LZO has a higher output rating, but I'm not 100% on that. So don't quote me there. I'm pretty sure it does have a higher, I just don't remember the number. I think it was close to 500, but don't quote me there. But honestly, if you bear in mind, if you are somebody that wants a full-size truck that you want is capable, but gets mileage, it's a great option. Now, buckled behind that is the 10L80, which the 10L80 10-speed transmission is a joint venture between Ford Motor Company and General Motors. They co-developed the transmission, sorry. So, you got a little bit of assurance because, at least from what I've seen in the dealership world, the 10-speed seems to hold up better than the 8-speed and 6-speeds did. But, it's not saying too much. But, if you are to go full-size GM, 110% I would recommend, if you want a full-size truck that is capable and you're going to do a good bit of towing, the 3-liter diesel, chef's kiss. The only application I personally would prefer, and it is the one I prefer eventually for us to purchase to replace that one, is a Yukon with that engine. It's because I want the same or better fuel economy that this car gets, but the capability of fitting more people. And not just more people, but more cargo, because obviously we'd want a long wheelbase. But, yeah, kind of a quick and dirty on the 3-liter Duramax. It's a fantastic engine, 10 out of 10 would recommend. Now, there are problems that they do have, but, every engine has a quirk, has an issue. Nobody's perfect. Hell, even Toyota's having problems in this day and age. So, 10 out of 10 recommend. Go out there and get you one. Just remember, there is a timing belt that has to be serviced on those. And it's going to be expensive. But if you don't mind putting up with that down the line, go pick one up today. Thank you for watching.